Now that we are familiar with what are tables in general and what are the basics of the HTML table element, let's now look on how we can use them in our project. So it says here HTML tables allow web developers to arrange data into rows and columns. As we can see here in the example here, we have an organized set of data that is contained inside of a table, from where we have a company, contact persons, and countries from where those companies are located. We define a table in HTML using the table tag, and it has child elements that we use to define rows, which is the tr tag. We define a header using the th tag, and we define table data cells by using the td tag. By default, the text in a th element are bold and centered, and for the td elements, they are regular and left aligned. We can see here that we have a table tag, but we don't have a table column tag. This is one of the biggest hurdles when we are using the HTML table, because we don't have a table column. What we normally do, if we go down here in the example given by W3 School, we can see here a very simple table layout. So if we go click on try it yourself, we can see inside of the table element, the first table row tag contains the table headers that contains the values first name, last name, and age. We don't see any border inside of our table, and for us to easily distinguish the rows and columns, let's give it a border attribute of 5 pixels and then run it. Now we can easily see that we have our first row that contains the headers, the second row, the third row, and the fourth row that contains the table data cells. A keynote to remember is that we don't have table columns, and TD is a single table cell that contains content. We don't have a table column tag, and what we use to create columns is by inserting table data cells in each of the rows horizontally. If we go and try to remove this data cell here inside of the second row and run this, you would see that the data cell that contains the value 50 here moved back and is now under the last name data column. From that information that we've seen here, we now understand that each data cell that is inside of the table row are placed horizontally, one after another, creating effectively the columns. I'm hoping you now understand how columns are made inside of tables using the data cells inside of the table rows. So before we proceed with us using this in our project, I just want to specify here the border attribute that we included here to create borders here inside of our basic HTML table example. This is no longer recommended that we use this border attribute, because under the table element documentation here and we go down here, we can see here some attributes that are available for this element. And we have here the deprecated attributes that is no longer recommended. We have the align attribute, the BG color attribute, the border attribute. If you go and hover under the thumbs down icon here, it will say this deprecated API should no longer be used but will probably still work. As to the case that we have done here, it worked. However, it's not the recommended way for us to add borders anymore in our HTML tables. The better way for adding borders inside of our table will be, as we go to our documentation here, HTML table add a border will be to use the CSS border property, such as this one, and we can see here that we were able to go and add a border of 1 pixel solid black for this table with border example. I would highly recommend that you go through the documentations here, so at least you'll be more familiar with some of the explanations that are written here and shown here in the MDN documentation and the w3schools.com documentations. Remember, the tables are used for structured data and organizing tabular data, and we avoid using them as layouting containers because we have semantic elements such as header, section, article, div elements that are meant for that. Some keynotes to take note here on why we use the following elements or the semantic elements that can be used for layouting is because their width will be defaulting to the 100% of their parent element. And tables, on the other hand, will be based from the content of the table data cells. Now let's go implement what we've learned in our markup. So let's have tr, our first row, and th with the class of t heading 1 multiplied by 2, so that we can have here our story author, and original stories. Okay, so let's look at our document. Let's refresh this. We can see that we have those content here, table headers, that has a default value of bold. And let's go back to our code editor. Let's have a header inside of our table. So let's have an h2 before the tr that will have a table of contents element content. So let's save that, and then let's go back to our browser here. So we have the table of contents here. Okay, let's go back to our markup here, and let's go and create another table row that will contain tht heading 2 multiplied by 3, that will contain the last name, first name, and the story title. So let's save that. Let's go back to our browser, and let's see how that will look like. Okay, so we have our heading 2, we have our 2 t headers, and we have our last name, first name, and story title. So we have 3 columns for this. We have 2 columns here. So we're adding table headers horizontally inside of the table rows. Now let's get back to our code here, and I would want to go and have at least 3 more rows. And in each of those rows, I would want to have some td that will contain some first name. Let's have Lopez Rodrigo. And here I would want to have the first title of my first story, original story, about my dog Tiger, my beloved dog Tiger. In here I would want to have 3 TDs also, times 3. And then I'm also the author for this, so I'm just going to go and use a nickname. Then Snarf, my cat, is one of my cats, my beloved cats before, and another TD multiplied by 3. Let's first save this, and let's try to look on what it looks like on our browser already. Now let's try to go and refresh this. So we can see here that we have the following. We were able to create 3 table data cells in each of the rows. So the first one here, or the first one here, will be the 2 columns, or the 2 th headers. Here the 3 th headers, and here the 3 data cells, td tags. And same here. So if I go and try to go back to our code editor and then add some content here, and I'm just going to go name this rod, and let's save that. Let's go back to our browser. So you would see that we are adding content inside of each of these columns by means of adding the table data tag, by using the table data tag. Now for us to be able to add borders, let's go back to our code, just so that we will be able to easily go and identify each of the columns and the rows. Let's go to our style tag here, and then let's have a section for the tables, section tables, and then let's go and select the table. Again, this is not a CSS course, but I'm already using CSS, so at least you'll have an idea already on how to use CSS, and this is the more recommended way of styling our HTML elements instead of using attributes. Now let's go and add a border in our table element. So let's have 1 pixel solid black. Let's see how that will look. Let's refresh. So there's the border. Just for us to be able to go and distinguish the rows from the columns, let's also add some borders inside of the T header and the TD elements. We can actually do that by selecting the element selector TH and the TD. Let's save that and let's see how that will look in our document here. Here we can see that the following elements, the TH elements in the first row and the second row, are being displayed as according to what we've read here. They are sized according to their content. The tables are sized according to their content. And on the second row here, as explained here, the TH tags are bold and centered. And for the following TD tags, they are regular and left aligned. Just take note that this may look like bold because of the font family that we use and the Google font that we use. However, we can see here that this has a much higher weight, font weight,